Welcome to Command and Control, a podcast series about military command and the control measures used to orchestrate combat engagements and wars. In this episode, we're hearing from the mayor of a city that was hit with a massive cyber attack back in 2019. There are some salutary lessons here for both civil and military leaders about what decision making looks like when serious crises hit home. The show is sponsored by Systematic.
Systematic's world-leading command and control software, the Citaware Suite, is in use in 16 NATO countries and more than 50 militaries worldwide. Its open architecture allows complete integration with legacy systems while meeting all NATO interoperability standards, and its intuitive interface bridges language and domain barriers across alliances.
I was at the NATO Command and Control Centre of Excellence conference in Rotterdam, November 2025, and heard a presentation from Sebastiaan van T Evre. Sebastiaan was the mayor of Lochem when the municipality got hit by a massive cyber attack, impacting on everything from welfare payments to the sewer system. His handling of the crisis, the aftermath, and the subsequent recovery earned him accolades and awards. But the lessons he has are more personal, broader in scope, and hold deeper insights into how civil C2 needs to be prepared. Now, at that conference, he was only given a short time to talk about the civil political leadership, but it was clear there was much more of a story to tell, and that he had some clear ideas on how to tackle the continuing challenges posed by Russian actions. This discussion, therefore, is not intended as a leadership lesson per se, but a conversation about civil command and control when the unexpected happens. Sebastiaan, welcome to the show. I want to talk about the cyber attack and have you explain it in detail. But before that, just to give us an idea of your expertise and background and qualifications, if you will, as a politician, I wonder whether you could talk about how you ended up as mayor. From what I've read, you studied biology, agriculture and public administration at university and then worked at the European Centre for Nature Conservation. These don't feel like the beginnings of a politician, indeed someone who knew a lot about cyber infrastructure preparedness or commanding the machinery of government, right? So how did you get to be mayor? What was the journey?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Peter. It's an honor to be on the show, and I'm glad to share my experiences and actually explore the topic of civil and military cooperation. I'm sure we'll get to that, but let's start at the beginning. I never had any idea that I would be mayor, but I still ended up as one. I studied at Wageningen University. I started in biology, and I first learned the very important lessons that biologists often are right, but not awarded it. It's a Dutch expression. You can be right, but you're not getting your right. And that got me into the field of politics. And that has never let me go. And I've been on a long journey. I've been on the municipal council of the city of Amersfoort. I've been an alderman there. And from there, I went on to be mayor. And I was really motivated by this change I can see in a society where old hierarchical systems are being transformed by networks. I truly believe that the importance of any person is not based on their hierarchical position, but on their relevance in a network to others. That was really what motivated me as a mayor to start help transforming government to really meet this new vision of how systems work.
Just so I understand, do you get elected by the population? Do you get elected by the council? How do you get elected to the position of mayor?
To become a mayor in the Netherlands, you have to apply to the local council, and the local council selects two candidates, and the preferred candidate is usually chosen, it's been so for the last 15 or 20 years, by the Minister of Internal Affairs, and then you're appointed by the King as to be positioned above the political parties, because the municipal council, in the end, is still the boss of any municipality.
Okay, and that's, I guess, what the interesting part is. So in a military context, it's clear who the commander is. In a civil context, in the Netherlands, in a municipality, the mayor sits above the council as a sort of governor, or how does the power get exercised, manifested, if you will?
Well, I think it's multifold. On one hand, you're the chair of the municipal council, and the council by law is the most important organ of the whole municipality. And in executive things, especially when it comes down to crisis management, mayors have certain executive powers that they can assert if needed. And during evaluation, they reply and answer to the council.
Okay, right. So without further ado, let's get to the situation. Give us a sort of lead up to the experience that happened to the municipality in 2019.
Well, I have been concerned about digital security in municipalities for quite a long time. So in that week, I had been working on different scenarios, how to train aldermen and mayors in what to do when digital incidents happen. For instance, what would happen in an elderly home if a smart thermostat would get hacked and would be locked during a cold freeze. Who would be responsible to take on that incident? Is the owner of the house? Is it the care system? Is it the municipality? Is it what we call the security region? Is the cooperating fire brigades? Who would be in charge of dealing with such kind of incident? Because there are so many incidents that do not fit traditional hierarchies of power. And I was working on that one day. We had thought of lots of different scenarios. And in the evening, I think it was just about 8 o'clock, I got a phone call from my chief information security officer saying, Sebastiaan, we just had a call from the team high-tech crime of police if we would open up City Hall. And I said, well, that's a bit weird. I think somebody just misplaced the scenario. Let's double check. And it turned out not to be a false flag. It was truly a hack. And we tumbled down the abyss and start at the beginning. There are several things I did that were extraordinary that I didn't know were extraordinary at the time, because when I got the call, I activated the crisis system. For some reason, it doesn't always happen that quickly that the higher leadership activates a cyber crisis if a cyber crisis actually happens, because lots of times it's always kept on a managerial level. We are still trying to fix it. There's no need to raise the alarm. But I did raise the alarm and I said, we are having a crisis. We need the crisis system activated and we need to be open and transparent about it. That was also a new thing. During the weekend, I actually got several mentions in national newspapers that this new openness that I started was really refreshing. It wasn't my intention to be refreshing. It was my intention to ensure that we all could learn from it, because it was my conviction that if one municipality can get hacked, we all can get hacked. And if all the Dutch municipalities are down, we are in deep trouble. So that was what started me. And I decided it was a crisis. We want to be transparent and we needed to get the experts in. So we hired forensic investigators just to make sure that if everything that was done would also stand up in court, if we would ever be able to get the people who did this to court. And it was really, really going well. A few years earlier, we had another ransomware attack. That was a few days before a national election. And that is not a nice situation, because in the Netherlands, the municipalities organize all elections. And if you're not able to present the results of that election through the digital system that applies there, it's not good news for any mayor. So that was a bit scary moment, but we just had to put the backups back where in the system, and that was all functioning again. So that was basically what we're trying to do. Yes, we have a crisis and we're just putting the backups back and we'll be fine. And we had a long weekend. It was Pentecost, I think. And on that Tuesday, we were starting having meetings again. And during the weekend, I had been there when we were saying, well, we're doing so great. We're restoring everything. And on Tuesday evening, I was in a meeting with chair people of the municipal council, and I got pulled from that meeting. That never happens. As a mayor in such a meeting, you are never pulled from that meeting. And it was by the crisis team. They said, well, we can't be sure if they didn't acquire a golden ticket. And if you ever read Roald Dahl's famous book, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you know what a golden ticket is. If you got a golden ticket, you're in. You've bypassed all the defensive systems that there are, and there's no way of detecting if you're ever truly in or out. So for me, that was a really, really decisive moment, because that meant that we couldn't guarantee the integrity of our whole IT system. So in the next 5 minutes, I decided if we don't have our integrity, we don't have nothing. We will flush our whole IT system down the drain and rebuild it from start, just to make sure that we are in control of our own system.
So hang on, can I just go back in? The normal SOP would have been cyber attack, effectively take down your systems, go back to the last save you had that was good, reboot with the last save you have, and then you've only lost whatever it is, the transactions, the orders since that last save, which you should be able to make up in somehow. But at least you've got the core of it, right? You've got decades worth of history, you've got all the data, you've got everything. But you're saying this golden ticket gave them access to probably corrupt or at least be present on those backups as well.
Yeah, one of the things that was in my mind, I don't want to have to go to the Interior Minister explaining we're not sure who the people are that we handed passports to.
Wow. Okay.
That is the essence of integrity of a municipality, because we do so many various things that if the integrity is violated, it hits the core of government.
Right. Okay. So just then explain this decision. You decided to ditch your entire IT system, to say all that is dead.
Yes.
And to go out and build from scratch.
Yes, we had to rebuild everything.
Okay.
It was a very decisive moment and a radical moment, but I still believe it was the best decision I took. But this is also the reason why I'm still to this day always telling this story, because in Lochem we had a relatively small municipality and we had applied a few principles of simplicity and complexity reduction. These are jargon terms often used in IT, and just basically keep it simple, buy it off the shelf. If you do that, you might be able to restore your IT systems relatively quick. We were able to rebuild our system to a basic level in 24 hours. I've been talking to mayors and CISOs from big cities, and they looked me in the eye and said, well, if I'm truly honest, I don't know who I should call to make sure that every last shed that's rented by the municipality where there's a computer somewhere in a corner actually gets flushed down the toilet like you've been doing. So basically getting the flush done will take a week, and then rebuilding with all the complexities that we have, little kingdoms and political bureaucracies and internal things that we do, it might take us 2 to 3 months to get where you were in 24 hours.
Oh my goodness.
That was really, really scary for me, because municipalities do a lot. And this is also a problem, because if you talk to leadership often, it's, well, if the computer fails, we'll just take a notebook and start having our meetings, not with a computer in hand, but we'll write our notes down. That's not the point. Everything we do these days is a digital process. It's from handing out passports to handing out social benefits to organizing care for the elderly in the Netherlands, to waste collection, and even flushing the toilet. As you said in the introduction, we have created a system where sewer pumps are smart these days. And if it's smart, it's vulnerable. And we live in a beautiful agricultural municipality. We have lots of open fields. So if there's an urgent need, we might find our way. If you have to do that in a big international city, there's no way. There's going to be immediate risk to public health. And that's no joke. These are the things that we need to be aware of. And this is how vulnerable we are, because we have all these supply chain vulnerabilities that come together in a municipality and municipalities in a wider field as well. So we were lucky. We were able to rebuild that system in 24 hours. And we also had our problems, because we had to call all our suppliers saying, do you have anybody working with you who has ever seen a keyboard? Because we need anybody who can type. Because rebuilding is a lot of work.
That's what I wanted to get onto. So, you had the authority to take this extremely bold move, right? And you say, did you have any idea of how long it would take you to recreate the system when you made that decision?
Well, I think the best story is by one of our civil servants who is called Johan. He is on retirement now, but he was an old school civil servant. And he said, well, I just don't trust computers and printers. And if I have to do marriages next week, I always print them on Friday just to make sure that we're done for the week ahead. So because of Johan, we were still able to do marriages in the week that the whole system went down. So I'm very grateful to Johan to this day that he is who he is. This is also practical resilience in practice. Sometimes you have to resort to things that you never thought of, but just are a fine solution if the computer fails. And no, we did not have a true understanding how long it would take to guarantee that everything would be up again, but weighed against that fact that if you've lost your integrity, you've got nothing. So restore our integrity first, and then we'll start building up from that. And we've learned lots of lessons as well, because if we're paying out social benefits, these days we keep a copy of the payments of this month on a tape, and we keep it safe. So if we fail, we can hand that tape to a neighboring municipalities, and they will pay out last month's benefits as this month's benefits. And it might be a small lack of accuracy, say we 10, 15% needs fine tuning, but the bulk of all the benefits payments has been done and has been working out. Because if not, take any big city in Western Europe, if you're not paying the social benefits for 2 months, I think that there will be riots on the street.
Right, I get it. So you rebuilt the system, even at the basic level, in 24 hours, which I find a staggering effort. And you somehow had to populate that with data, orders, processes, payment systems, and people just busily typing in and entering a huge amount of data and code into it in order to make it fit for task. How long was it then before you were content that you'd restored a sense of normality? Not 100%, but the sense of normality whereby you were functioning as you hoped to.
I think it was about 2 weeks that we were satisfied that we had most processes up and running again. And it's also an iterative process because we were so open and we got all the experts in. We learned lots of lessons of things that we should do different. And we started doing them different, but some of them required purchasing new applications and new organizing structures, etc., etc. So that takes longer time. But in a week or two, we were relatively satisfied that we had things under control again.
I'm struck living in a democracy, and whilst you had executive authority as the mayor, right, there was obviously the council sitting under you. How engaged were they in this? Or was it just so time critical that you made decisions and just went off on your own way and got someone else to breathe through? How did you engage in the sort of the politics of it?
Well, this was a situation of taking action first and reporting back later. That is what we did because it was so crucial to regain the integrity of our system. That was priority 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. until we had this integrity restored. And I'm really glad that we have this system in the Netherlands because I had the full authority to make all the decisions that I had. The one thing that I'm truly worried about is that we live in a highly connected world. I said it before, if one municipality got hacked, it might be another one that goes down with us as well. And we are also connected to what we call the security and safety regions, where all the fire brigades work together. And they also organize the national emergency number, 112 in the Netherlands, 901 in other parts of the world. And if our hack compromises that national emergency number, that will be devastating. And there are so many scenarios and ways of looking at what is this, what could it have been. It could have been just a coincidental hit, but I'm not so sure about it because afterwards we learned we had very good researchers and they found that these hackers had been in our system for at least 9 months and they had been very, very careful not to trip any tripwires that we had set in our network because we had basic provisions in detecting hacks like these, but they were so professional. I always explain it to people. If a teenager gains access to a computer system, they usually start clicking around, see where they can get. If you can leave days between several mouse clicks, you're less likely to trigger an alarm. And if you take so much time and invest so much time in exploring a system, it indicates dedication and professionalism at a level that scares me.
Okay, I want to come back to that in a second, but also just before that, go back to the interconnectedness and the other agencies, the emergency numbers, the other municipalities that were around, and connections, I'm sure, to the federal government. When you implemented the crisis response cell as your sort of first number one action, did they sort of take on much of that work of informing them what was going on and getting them to check their own vulnerabilities?
This is one of the fun things that happens during a cyber crisis. The connectedness of systems does not apply to the hierarchy of the mandate because everybody was involved and nobody was responsible. And that's a very weird situation to be in. We learned that at the time we had 147 standard data couplings to other governmental organizations. And 2 months after the hack, it was the Ministry of Justice that gave us a call. Well, there's something up with you, wasn't there? And if I tell this story to a large audience, they always start giggling. Civil servants taking their time. But it's still, they were the first one out of the 147 that were actually having a connection, that actually reached out to us. You had been compromised. How secure is our cooperation at this point? this is not something that's inherent to how we organize government, to look at it from such a cyber-connected perspective.
I guess the audience would be very interested to understand who did this. Like, attribution is always a big thing in democracies, in societies at the moment. Did you ever get an idea? I mean, was it a ransomware attack? Was there a request for Bitcoin? I mean, what sat behind this? Do you know? Are you able to say, I guess I should say first thing?
I am allowed to say that it was an advanced persistent threat who worked very professional, and that the researchers who did their forensic work discovered that they used Cyrillic keyboards. And that's all I'm allowed to say.
Okay, that gives us enough of a feeling. And again, the nature of this, the months between, or the days between keystrokes, is really quite something. I guess if we could just talk about the command and the control, a very military term. You're the mayor. You have, in a cyber sense, I mean, I guess in governance sense, you have a bunch of people who execute this stuff on your behalf, and you have your fingers on them to be able to take action, respond to you, give you feedback and all the rest of that stuff. But there are a load of sort of ephemeral connections as well, right? Not just with politics, but with society, the electorate, but also with business, with leaders, with other local politicians, the federal politicians. Did you feel that you were left on your own to deal with it? Was there help forthcoming? Did you feel supported? I mean, as a personal experience, how did you feel? Because it doesn't strike me that you were particularly prepared to take on, a huge leadership role like this, albeit that you've been mayor for 6 years by this stage?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Had that experience prepared you for this leadership role where you've said no one was responsible, but effectively you were the one who's responsible for this? You'd taken it on yourself. You made the decision, the executive calls, you'd implemented the plans. This was on you, right?
Well, I think it's an attitude. If you need to step up to the plate, you do it. If you need to take decisive action, you take decisive action. It was my responsibility to restore the integrity of my municipality. So I took the necessary action, and I was decisive on it, because any delayment would only increase the trouble that we were in. I think that's basically an attitude of stepping up to the task that needs to be done. And the complexity, what you suggested, one of the challenges that we actually had was this whole ephemeral surrounding of it, because we're not sure if we were the final target, because in Lochem is also the headquarters of a company called For Farmers, which is Europe's largest agricultural feed producer. And as a municipality, we often email with them for permissions, etc., on what they're doing in their daily lives. And if you had an interest in disrupting the agricultural economics of Europe, that will be a very interesting target to focus on. We're not sure if they were the target, but it could very possibly be. And I think it was 2 weeks after the incident, I had a very disappointed colonel at my desk, because there also is something called the National Response Network. If there's an incident that's a big impact on the government, we have a National Response Network. And this colonel was very disappointed because his troops should have been activated, and he has a big conglomerate because also the tax services is involved and other big organizations on the side of government are involved. If there is a big incident, we have the capability to act. And this is, from a command and control perspective, very interesting, because we have a capability, but we're just not able to put the capability on the ground where it's needed, because somewhere in the command and control chain, it doesn't work as we thought it would. And I never knew that we had this kind of resources. I was just dealing with the crisis on my own. I was trying to be as decisive as I needed to be with all the capabilities that I had. I started calling our suppliers for people who'd seen keyboards. We started calling other municipalities. Do you have system administrators that we can borrow? That there was a national response network, I didn't know. And in our crisis system, they were not activated. So this is why also we need to do exercises, and not just tabletop exercises with guardrails on them just to make sure that it always looks nice for the people who are being trained, but actually trying to explore where do our crisis systems fail and where do we need to do better.
That's a really big thing. I guess in a personal sense, did you feel that the top consideration in your mind was financial? Was it political? Was it societal? Were you just pulled all over the place? I mean, you said you had this single aim, right? Which I think everyone gets and is quite something. Under the shock of capture, the shock of combat, that cauldron, that moment in which you're caught in this, in the headlights, as it were, and suddenly you've got to make those decisions. You didn't freeze, you made those decisions. Was there a sort of list of things cascading in your mind that you're like, okay, I can prioritize my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Did you establish a small group around you that provided you, with trusted advice? How did you structure it? Did you go with the system, the crisis management system, or did you come up with something else?
No, we just used the traditional Dutch crisis management system, and that actually performed really, really well because that provides for any crisis or any incident the right structure in analyzing what is it that we're facing, what facts do we know, what are the targets that we're trying to achieve, and what options are on the table. So that crisis management structure works really, really well, and it does help as a leader if you have a clear aim. And because I was clear, we need to deal with it. So take decisive action whenever it needs to be taken, not just by me, but also on the people who are actually at the keyboards. We need to be open and transparent so that others can learn, and we need to restore our integrity. These are key points in driving this crisis response action that really structured all the work that we did.
And after the recovery period, how did it go down? I mean, it's not a story that's widely told outside the Netherlands. It's not something that local mayors over here are aware of, or, I don't know if, the Spanish are aware of it, or it's not a story that is well known. Did you feel sort of supported, ostracized? Did you feel engaged? I mean, you do a lot of outreach now and teaching with politicians, with mayors at that level. Did you feel at the time there was a shock? There was a people wanting to distance themselves from you? Or how did it go afterwards? As a politician, as a mayor, these things can often be a double-edged sword, right? I mean, it's open for lots of criticism and people questioning your decisions. Or did you feel it was people engaged and they were supportive and they were like, right, okay, let's move forward?
Well, I think the stance of openness, transparency, and learning that I started created a whole new context of cooperation, because lots of people wanted to learn from us what we had actually experienced, and not just on a technical level, but on a managerial and a leadership level as well. Because if you're dealing with any incident, well, you have to go from strategic to tactical to operational to tackle these kind of challenges. And that's where we really started to share our experiences as a whole municipality, just to raise awareness about what can happen.
And of those lessons, I mean, are there important ones that you would do? I mean, you've already mentioned the full no boundaries training opportunities that you need to exercise, the military would say. You need real exercise out in the field, out in the ground. You need to remove the boundaries and go for it. But were there things about structures and systems and processes that you, looking back now, you've gone, we should have done this differently? Do you raise those sort of things with people? What are they?
I think there are lots and lots of lessons. Well, the first lesson is actually, what is the target that we've set in our cybersecurity? Is it okay if you fail a day, a week, a month? We just had a situation in the Netherlands where our Office of Public Prosecutors were taken out by a cyber incident for more than 10 weeks. That is a very long time. And if we take the other way, if you look at banks, they know if they fail for seconds or minutes, the economy starts losing millions. So they have a very high rate of cyber resilience and cybersecurity. And this, I think, is a much more political discussions that we need to have, because if you're just a small baker around the corner, it might not be that the website you also have is mission critical for what you're doing. But if you're a big company and your whole IT system is mission critical, and if you're losing money by the millions each hour that you're offline, well, you need to raise your cyber defenses. And these are the discussions that we should be talking much, much more about. And I think this is also a matter of interconnectedness, because we are much more interconnected than we ever thought we would be. And this is also what I share about municipalities are not on their own. It's just not one municipality. It's all of them. And we are also working together. We're working with companies. We are working with suppliers. There are much more risks at large in the digital ecosystems than we are aware of. And managing the digital ecosystem versus being the leader of just one organization and saying, well, there's nothing to worry about. Everything is safe and secure. You can go to bed easily. That's the paradigm that we need to start changing. It's not about just one organization. It's talking about the whole ecosystem.
2025 was a year in many ways of cyber attacks becoming much more widely known. I mean, just in the UK, we had big shutdowns of Marks and Spencer's. Banks have been attacked. We had Jaguar Land Rover, the following impact on their supply chain, their employment of people, potential government bailouts. We had on an international scale, I remember being in Spain when Amazon payments went down. There were huge number of problems and practicalities that have been lost in 2025. Is there a problem with how we are structured as a society versus how the interconnectedness, the digital interconnectedness, the cyber domain works? Are we too hierarchical in how we operate versus what happens in cyberspace?
Well, the hierarchy of government systems does not match the digital ecosystem as it is today. Even though the United Kingdom is now outside of the European Union, but in the European Union, they're now working on a new directive or the implementation of the new directive, which is called NIS2. And each member state has to implement that directive in law. And this might seem very good because we're now having a new law and all kinds of organizations have to apply to new norms, etc., etc. But what they didn't take into account is the reality of the ecosystem. If you are a European company and are working in several member states and you have a digital incident, you now have to apply 27, because there are 27 member states, 27 implementations of the same directive, each having their own place to report any incident and different timings and what is necessary when an incident happens. And that does not reflect the digital ecosystem that we have. And I think this is a design flaw in the European Union when it comes to these kinds of digital legislations, because I understand that there's a European directive that needs to be implemented by a member state. But in the digital reality, it's not just one member state, it's 27 of them. If we're now talking about digital sovereignty as well, which has become a huge, huge theme in the digital ecosystem, it's very important that we create a vital and valuable economic system in the European Union. And this hierarchy that we used to have, that was built basically just in the fundamentals of the European Union, doesn't work in the digital ecosystem. And this is something that we truly need to overcome.
So I just want to move on to that, because whoever attacked, and I'm putting that in inverted commas, air commas, whoever attacked your municipality when you were mayor, there is a huge amount of activity, an increasing amount of activity from Russia today that uses the digital ecosystem to scrape at the underbelly of European societies on a national and international level, right? And it's more and more pernicious. It has greater impacts on people, and it's growing in frequency as well. What are the things that now out of office with time to consider, ongoing with your PhD, are there real tangible things we can do to start addressing this? Because it feels like we're just sort of, talking about change, but playing to the status quo. We'll introduce a new law and everything will be fine. And it doesn't feel that that's enough.
No, I think we really need to step up to the plate again. If you look, for instance, to the Baltic states, they really know what the pressure is that the European Union is currently under. And I feel that we should basically do two things. I think we should have a permanent Article 4 table in the European Union. Under the NATO treaty, it's possible to consult with each other. And I think a permanent consultation on the European level is absolutely necessary. And I think we can also invoke Article 2 within that Article 4 table. This might be very legalistic, but in Article 2 it says that we should strengthen our institutions. And that creates a whole new platform for civil-military cooperation, because we all know that there is a state trying to undermine society. And I think we need an integrated response to that. We cannot wait for an Article 5 situation where we will just respond with kinetic energy to a threat that is much more creeping through our veins, so to speak. If you look at what they're doing, I think there are scholarly writers from Scandinavia who've been writing about the hybrid war for at least a decade. We all know what the strategies are. We're just not responding to them. And I think we need to formulate our own responses. I think we should declare, we used to have a Cold War. I think now, today, we have a grey war. There are actions. I'm not sure what the situation in the United Kingdom is, but we in the Netherlands have had so many infestations of drinking water with bacteria as either our infrastructure is deteriorating at an incredible rate or there's a matter of sabotage. And nobody wants to worry the population too much. But I do think that we need to get our resilience in order. So these are the things that we should be working on because the threats are so high. We should be working together as countries on a European level and integrating all the levels of government from nation states to the practical level of municipalities, water treatment organizations, which sometimes might be in companies or as public bodies or any other way that's organized, because we need to get this resilience in order. Because I don't want to be provoked into a war by a single action that might trigger a societal response that we can't control.
Escalation and unexpected escalation being the danger that you're highlighting there. Listen, before we go, I just wanted to ask one question. I mean, and there will be mayors out there who, are recommending this podcast to listen to what you're saying. If there was one piece of advice that you would guide them through, because most of them will come into office not expecting something like this to arrive, not having had training in cybersecurity or IT or business practices or systems infrastructure or supply chain management, what would it be? What's the one thing that you would say to mayors, or future mayors who are about to take office or are in office now? What is it that you would say would really help or would have helped you more?
I'll phrase it into one. Make sure that there are several intelligent norms that you can apply. ISO norms 27001 is a very famous cybersecurity norm. Is it actually in place? Prove it, test it, and take me on an exercise with it. That will be the one thing I would say. Just make sure, check the norms and practice with it.
Sebastiaan, thanks for sharing your experiences and for your honesty. Lochem was clearly fortunate to have you back in 2019, and it's clear from your work now with politicians of all varieties about how they need to prepare themselves that your work is acknowledged and appreciated. And good luck for the remainder of your PhD.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Now, if you want more from Sebastiaan, you can check him out on LinkedIn. He regularly publishes articles, including some really interesting stuff on Article 2 there, where he goes into a little bit more detail. The show is sponsored by Systematic.
Systematic. Join your partners and allies already using our cutting-edge C4 ISR Sit-Aware suite.
We hope you enjoyed the show, as well as telling your friends and colleagues about it. Please do hit the like or subscribe buttons. The episode is produced by AureliusThinking.com as a show for the Waiver Room, the home of intellectual curiosity and challenging thinking for military professionals everywhere. Thanks for listening.